Welcome to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life, with psychologist and author of over 75 books, Dr. Barry Weinhold.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life with Dr. Barry Weinhold. My name is Ashley Ross. Dr. Weinhold, how are you today?
Fine, and I'm wishing you a Merry Christmas.
You as well. Wonderful time of year.
Yeah.
Are you excited to get to spend a little bit of time? I know you mentioned you had some parties, a party at your house you were throwing. Anything else special going on?
My son's here for Christmas with me.
That is nice.
That'll be fun.
Yeah. We've been speaking a lot about family traditions. Do you have any that you guys still celebrate?
Not very many around Christmas anymore, but it'll just be good to have some family with me during the holidays.
Yeah, that definitely
My daughter
is true.
is in New Mexico, and she's married and usually spends a lot of Christmas with her husband's relatives.
I haven't had that problem yet because we live within about an hour of each of our families. We live kind of in the middle of both, and we hope to move actually to the East Coast cross country someday. So I think that will definitely add new challenges and experiences to our holidays.
I just saw on news item that 1 out of 4 Americans moved to a different state in the last 5 years.
Wow.
I mean, we're pretty mobile people.
Yeah, I think that's happening more and more.
Yeah, but that's not true in Europe. Maybe a little more now, but I mean, people often don't leave their village or their city, and never their whole lifetime. And that was actually my family. I mean, my parents have never left the town they were born in, and my sister hasn't either. My brother and I have. She still lives in the same town she was born in, and will probably die in.
That's pretty common.
Yeah,
that's pretty common for a lot of my family as well. As the generation got older, that wasn't the case anymore, mostly because there's not a lot of jobs in that area anymore. But it's really interesting to see. I wonder if that has to do with rural, if that's more common when you go in a rural area versus an urban area.
Well, sometimes it's availability of jobs and housing.
Yeah.
We lived in Slovakia. That they were great in terms of bonding and attachment. I mean, they had 3 years of paid maternity leave and all that. But when the children got to emancipation age, they often were living with their parents and stayed living with their parents even after they were married with one of their parents, because they just either their job was close by, or they had a family job in the family business, or they couldn't find housing. So they stayed into their 20s, living often in the basement.
Which I think you do actually find more often now, at least with these younger generations, because they face similar problems. At least where I live, housing crisis is very severe, and also jobs, especially jobs that support the housing that you can afford around here, is very.
No, there's also an expression of boomerang kids.
Yeah, that happens a lot here too.
yeah, and the kids who went out thinking that they were going to conquer the world, and they found the world conquered them, and they're back in their parents' basement.
Yeah. We end up with maybe a more positive version of that. Where we live is really beautiful, and so a lot of people will go away to get either an education or find a job that provides a great income, and then they're able to then take that experience and come back to live here with a better income. So that does help.
Well, I often think of Boomerang kids though are coming back because there's something they didn't get that they needed, and they think if they come back they might get it, and they often don't because they don't know what it is they're looking for.
Right.
If they understand what they're looking for, they might be able to get what they needed they didn't get earlier on, and then be more prepared to move out into the world.
Well, that's an interesting way. I was going to say that's an interesting way to segue because last week you introduced us to the 12 different patterns that, and I mentioned at the end of the episode that I could identify a few, and one of those happens to be the parentized child. So I did become the parent very early on in my life. I didn't have really a childhood. I was very responsible from a very young age and took on that caretaker role, not even just as a parent, but because of my grandmother and our situation. And I, at 18, was very ready to leave the house. I had zero looking back. I've been very self-sufficient, but to a fault because I also had my partner since that time, and creating an equal partnership was not something that I paid much attention to. And now we see 15 years later the results of those, the fruits of those labors. And so we've had to, again, create some awareness and then discussions around some of those things. So that definitely was one that hit home for me when you were talking about that last week.
Well, I mean, I did some therapy on my own to get myself out of that role because I was really feeling like I had lost a bit of my childhood in that process. And so in therapy, I was able to do some things that I should have been able to do at the age appropriate times, like get dirty. I was kept very clean. I was kept very clean when I was 3 and 5 years old, when you're supposed to be out, digging in the dirt and getting all dirty, and I wasn't allowed to do that. And so in my therapy, I bought a couple of boxes of chocolate pudding and made a big tub of chocolate pudding. And we were meeting in this church basement that had these walls that were pretty much, you couldn't harm them. They were sort of a glossy coat of paint or something on them. And I remember taking that chocolate pudding and smeared it all over the walls and all over myself. And I had such fun doing it. It was just really a great adventure in finally allowing myself to get dirty.
That does sound like a lot of fun. So that's one of my family patterns I had to break because I had the same scenario growing up. And my first son went to daycare, and they told me he would cry when they would let him outside to play when he got dirty. And I realized I made him afraid of dirt because I had carried over some of those things. And so we had to go out and play.
Great to get rid of that family pattern that got passed on.
Yes.
And,
very much so. And so now we have our second, and he is he's 16 months, and now I watch myself, and sometimes it does create a little, the like stress, but I let him play. We get into some trouble sometimes where maybe we let it go too far, and then we have to learn, like, there are some safe boundaries to not play with the garbage or the toilet appropriately.
All right. Well, I mean, everybody has these patterns. I mean, it's universal.
Yeah.
And so it's it takes some consciousness to be aware, like, of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and whether
Yeah.
that still has a function, a positive
Right.
function in our lives. And sometimes it doesn't, but we don't have the consciousness to know that. And when we get that, it's like, "Buh!" You know, I now see why I do that, and as you probably did with your son when you saw that. And anyway, let's
It
look
was
at the
very
list of main ways that I've come up with to change these patterns. And I think it's really useful to kind of focus on some of these. And the first one is obviously what we're just talking about, getting conscious, connect the dots and see how you're repeating these patterns. And again, as I often say, if you can name it, you can tame it. And so just naming the pattern and seeing how it's affecting your life often is enough to get people conscious enough to change them. Say, I'm just not going to do that anymore. And it's as simple as that, because it's like most of these patterns are in our unconscious behavior. I mean, we don't think about them, we just do them. But when we get conscious about them, then it becomes much easier to change them. And then the second one follows from that, looking at what happened and didn't happen that was incomplete in your family pattern that you identify. And these are the ones that will likely repeat due to your natural learning style, as I've often said. So if you can be, uh, when you see a pattern show up and you say, well, where did that come from? That's a good question to ask. And then to see if you can find out what did happen to you or didn't, that somehow was not, either you didn't understand it completely, and mostly you didn't understand the negative effects it had on you. And that's why it keeps repeating, is that once people understand that these patterns are not necessarily always good for us, and we realize that they have self-limiting characteristics, we then say, okay, well, we better change that. And then third, seeing what you can do in present time to complete anything left incomplete earlier. I mean, this is again the work of increasing your psychological intelligence to look for opportunities to complete anything that was left incomplete in some way or unfinished in some way. And the typical ways that things are unfinished is that you didn't get to talk about the effect it had on you, or you didn't have a voice in the situation, or you didn't have an opportunity to do anything that could have prevented it from happening. Or it may have been that you needed to hear some different things from the people that uh, help set the pattern in place. And in case, I mean, in case of a severe trauma or something that happened that really scared you as a child, if you had no one there to help you understand why you were scared and to comfort you at the time, then it became a trauma. And if there was somebody there who said, I see how this scared you, and I'm sorry you had to endure that, and here, let me hold you and give you some comfort, give me a hug, and with that kind of compassionate understanding, it just becomes another owie for a child. It doesn't become a trauma. And I think that's important for people to know, that whenever something happens that upsets your children, be there to help them understand why they're upset, and then to also offer comfort for them. But oftentimes when kids get upset, they have a temper tantrum and they're sent to their room. And that's the worst thing you can do in that situation, because they need help in re-regulating their emotions. They don't know how to do that yet. Often young children don't. So number four, give up blaming others for what happened to you. And I always tell my clients, you have a choice: either blame others or grow up. And basically what I mean is, take responsibility for if you didn't get something, or you got something that turned out not to be helpful or more harmful, you can change it. You have resources now that you didn't have as a child, certainly, and you can change it. And then also doing feeling work is important. Being able to identify and express the feelings that you lost in childhood, and maybe in whatever incidents that happened that set this pattern in place. you didn't get to really express your feelings the way you needed to, or having somebody there to understand your feelings and accept your feelings. Because sometimes people, parents in the heat of battle will just tell their child to stop crying, or something that tells them that that feeling is not acceptable, which then does more harm than actually anything else in terms of. So there's some feeling work that people have to do sometimes, and a lot of times my clients, if they're having an issue, I ask them to close their eyes and tell me how they feel when they're in that. Like one client had severe social anxiety. I asked him to close his eyes and tell me how he felt when he had social anxiety. And he said, I feel helpless and hopeless. And I said, okay, close your eyes again and tell me the first time you ever felt that way. And without a blink of an eye, he said, I was 3 years old and I saw my parents fighting. And I didn't know what to do. I was helpless and I felt hopeless. And so sometimes it connects you with the incidents that you may have forgotten that caused you to continue a family pattern. I do a lot of breath work with people, and sometimes if they're having trouble identifying, expressing feelings, breath work can help. It helps you get in touch with your body a little more and get your mind out of the way. So I find with some people who are very much in their head, and they try to overthink everything. Breath work sometimes helps bypass that, and they can just simply observe and react to how their body feels when they're breathing. And then removing toxic shame. And I've developed a number of ways to help my clients tame their toxic shame. And that's a topic in my new book, too, because I think it's really a lot of people carry around a lot of shame. And we as a nation carry shame. We have shame about Vietnam and about Iraq and about Afghanistan and all the wars that we fought and all the innocent people that died as a result. And even shame about the way we treated the Native Americans and the blacks, and now many Latinos that are different origin. We just don't have a good history of doing that kind of integration of people from other races and other cultures into our culture, and we carry a lot of shame, I think, for that as a nation. Body work. The body never lies. And so sometimes deep tissue massage can help you release patterns that are actually stuck in your body. That may sound kind of weird, but it's true that there's through body work, you get directly into places in our body where we store these patterns. And by massaging and doing deep tissue massage, sometimes you can get help a release. And maybe sometimes people don't even know what they're releasing, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to examine each piece of your material that you're discarding before you take it to the junk yard. It just get rid of it. Surrender and acceptance and forgiveness. There's a lot of things that go with these. I think people's lives are much better off if they can surrender to whatever life is bringing them, accept it, and also forgive themselves and others in that process. And then another one that I use a lot with my clients is working on the edge. This is specific ways to stay on the edge of an issue and explore the challenges of that issue before taking the risk of attempting to change it. So sometimes it's necessary to do that, to gain a little bit better context for what you're trying to change before you change it. And so some people need that, working on the edge for a while and trying to understand, well, why this is a problem and where it developed. And so I might take a couple sessions just to do that before we even jump into trying to change it. And then Gestalt Techniques, I use these periodically. You can, if you have an issue like an unresolved parental trait that you want to try to resolve, and you know that you can't talk to your parents about that, you can put one of your parents or the image of one of your parents in an empty chair and have a conversation back and forth with them and actually resolve things. So I do that with my clients and teach them how to do that for themselves. And you can also sculpt your pattern. This is an adaptation of Virginia Satir's technique, that where if you can kind of do have your partner and you each sculpt what's going on with you when you're in the middle of one of your patterns, and then take a look at what that represents. Sometimes it reveals a lot of things without a lot of words. Uh, and then I use meditation and prayer. I don't believe in leaving any of my troops at home. I try to get everything I can out of my meditation and prayer. And the difference for me is prayer is asking and meditation is listening, and for the answers to any questions you have. Centering, I teach my clients how to center and manage their stress, and so that they learn how to return to center when they're pulled off center by the reappearance of an old family pattern. Instead of freaking out about it, they can first begin to center themselves and then look at what they want to do about it. So that's another thing that I really focus on with my clients. And then really 15, loving yourself. There are many things you could do with this one, uh, like keeping a gratitude journal. I often recommend that for my clients. And record something every day in that journal that you feel grateful for. And basically, when you look at yourself in the mirror, do you hate yourself or do you love yourself? And basically expressing that love in the mirror to yourself is certainly a way of validating it, acknowledging that. And the adage is, and I think it's very true, is you can't love another until you love yourself. And you can only love another as much as you love yourself. So the limits on loving others are related to your limits about loving yourself. So that requires a lot of work sometimes, because we grew up mostly in families where we heard a lot of no's and not many yeses. The research says that children, by the time they've heard, by the time they're two, they've heard the word no about 200,000 times. Of course, the counter to that, they should have heard twice as many yeses, but they didn't get that 400,000 yeses. So they basically have a negative self-concept. If you ask people to write down all the things they like about themselves and all the things they don't like, guess which list is longer? Yeah, always the negative. And practice good nutrition and exercise. I think taking good care of yourself is a way of changing your family patterns, particularly if you were a parentized child and didn't take good care of yourself and took care mostly of others. And so it means sometimes being more focused on that than you would normally have to. And then resolving your conflicts. And any conflicts can be internal or external with yourself or other people. And it really amounts to being able to even resolve any things that show up from your past and conflicts that you've had with others in the past. And again, sometimes it's not possible to resolve them directly with the parents who are defensive or narcissistic or whatever. So and if that's true, I do two things with them. I do the Gestalt empty chair and have they put up their parent in an empty chair and say the things to try to resolve a conflict with them that they need to say. And the other one is I have a fairly extensive exercise with 14 steps about how to separate emotionally from a parent if you have conflicts that you can't resolve otherwise. So I have a lot of tools that I use in helping people change their intergenerational family patterns. But the ones that anyone can use are the first 3 or 4 up there. That they're basically things that you don't need a therapist to help you with. You can begin to do that yourself. So any comments about this, Ashley?
Actually, I'm pretty excited. I've actually started doing quite a few on the list already as
Good.
I've started kind of actually, becoming a business owner pushed me pretty hard to do a lot of self-reflection, because everything is on you at that point. You have to make it work. And so self-care is very important in order to maintain the energy needed for that. And so I got really tactical with how I was living my life. And I could say now, getting closer to my authentic self over these last 6 months has been kind of where my journey started. And so I can see a few now too that I can add to my list to continue working on these.
Yeah, I mean, this is the most complete list, but these are the ones that I've found most useful in my work with people. So
it's a journey, though. Even maintaining 4 or 5 of them all at once can be challenging, especially as a parent.
of course, I mean, we all live busy lives, and some of this requires you to stop the world and say, hey, wait a minute, I need some time to think about this.
Definitely.
And sometimes that time isn't available at the moment.
Definitely. But, just the thing that I've taken away is at least being aware and working towards it makes me feel like I'm on the right path, and gives me some hope and positivity that, trying and doing something is better than nothing at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, next time I'm going to shift gears a bit, but it relates to all of this in that I kind of was meditating one day, and I got this whole idea of, there are all kinds of beliefs that people have that get them in trouble. So I started during my meditation thinking about what they might be, and then I let go of it. And then when I was done, I went to my computer and started typing out the beliefs, and I got 20 of them. So they're my top 10, what I call my top 10 badass stupid beliefs people have about themselves that get them in trouble. And so I'm going to share that in the next episode.
I think that is going to be a great way to end off the year as far as our episodes have gone. So I'm really looking forward to it. Until next week, Dr.
We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
For more information, please visit the Colorado Institute for Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership at CICRCL.org or click the link in the show notes.